Juliet Jacques is a pretty impressive and influential figure. She's a prominent member of the British transgender and queer communities, and she has been for quite a few years now, 10 plus years. From 2010 to 2012, she had a column in The Guardian called A Transgender Journey. Shortly after that, she released a memoir called Trans, a Memoir. She's been published in loads and loads of different publications. It also mentions in her bio here that she's a filmmaker. I don't know what films she's made, but she's made them. She's also been on the pink list of influential LGBT people for like 4 years running, from 2012 to 2016, I think. She's done a lot, and Trans, a Memoir is perhaps her most famous thing. Until now? Maybe? This is Variations. This is a collection of short stories by Juliet Jacques that are all about the history of transgenderism in the UK for the last 150, nearly 200 years. It's fantastic. Every story in here is based on something true. At the start of every story, there's a little paragraph at the top of the page under the title that explains what inspired this or what it is based on. It's difficult even to call this fiction because it seems like it's a pretty accurate retelling or representation of a true thing. It goes in chronological order, from about the middle of the Victorian period to right up till today. And there's quite a few stories in here. And the stories are pretty long as well. Some of them go on for 20, 30, 40 pages. The fact that it's told in chronological order and each story jumps ahead a decade or two, maybe 3, shows the development, the evolution, and the even legal and political processes of being gay, queer, trans over time in this country. And there's also a huge breadth of style here. Some of what you find in these stories are like newspaper clippings. Others are diary entries. The very final one is a series of blog posts because it's taken from the modern day. There are diaries. There is even a film script at one point. Interviews is another one. It's a huge range of formats, and that really helps it remain interesting. But again, every single one of these things is or is based on a true thing written by or about a real person in British history. So how close to the truth it is, I'm not entirely sure, because this is described as a collection of short stories, but they're all real at the same time. I'm guessing perhaps Juliet Jacques took fragmented things and recreated them like you do with an old sculpture. I'm not sure. But anyway, what we have here is really, really valuable. As I said, it is showing the progression of politics and social relationships within the trans and queer communities as time has gone on. The first 2 stories are both set in the Victorian period, and the very first one is really sweet. It's about 2 men who are clearly, I guess, what you might call transvestites, or trans people but of their time period, or even drag queens. It's not really clear how you describe them because they're of the Victorian period, so labeling them using today's terms is quite difficult. But they are 2 men who like to dress up as women, and they try to disguise themselves in public, and one of them dresses up as a woman, and the other pretends to be her husband, and the 2 of them go on a night to the theatre. And it's about them trying to pass as an ordinary married couple. If they are caught, they will be arrested. It is public indecency. It is illegal to cross-dress. It's illegal to dress in the clothes that do not represent your gender. It's a terrifyingly archaic thing to think about now, but it was life 150 years ago. As these stories go on, these same kind of emotions bubble up in you. You'll see a story that represents what life was like for trans people, drag queens, or just gay people 50 years ago, and you think, wow, that's archaic, that's terrifying, but it's only 50 years ago. So it is kind of satisfying to see the progress we've made as trans people, as queer people, as a community, legally speaking as well. People are being accepted more and more, even when it seems like they aren't. You know, in the UK, this is Turf Island, this is transphobia central. But I was talking to my partner about this earlier. It seems like perhaps it's transphobia central because of the media and the way that it stirs things up, and the fact that there's so much trans activism and trans rights and so much discussion about being trans in the media right now, more than in other countries. If other countries had as screwed up of a media system as we do, thank you Rupert Murdoch, then maybe they'd have as much turfism and transphobia as we do because people get stirred up by the media. I'm not sure. I don't know. But there is still progress to be seen here, and that is very satisfying. What's also really great about this is that it's not just about trans women. It's a lot about trans men as well. Juliet Jacques is a trans woman, but probably half the stories in this collection are about trans men as well. And they are very different, and it really highlights, for me at least, the different struggles that trans men and trans women have faced throughout history. They are different struggles, and that's because of gender expectations on men and women to begin with. And it's fascinating who is offended by which type of trans person and why and how. And that really, really impacted me hard. There's one story about a trans man who wanted to fight for his country, and so he disguises himself as a man and goes out to Italy to become an ambulance driver for the army. And then he decides to become an exhibition in Blackpool as kind of a freak show, a circus troupe, where he pretends to have a wife and live in a normal nuclear family situation with a big glass wall where people can watch you like you're a museum exhibit. And it's really sad to watch, but it's interesting seeing how people are reacting to this woman who wishes to pass as an ordinary straight male member of society. From their perspective, the things they say, the things they react to, and what's interesting is in this story, it is described as really boring. The people who come to watch the exhibit don't find it interesting. It's just a guy and his wife living their lives, and they wanted something a bit more saucy and spicy, so a lot of the people who come to see it are disappointed, while still throwing out horrible transphobic, homophobic slurs. But it's interesting, this initial reaction of boredom, compared to the reaction to some of the trans women in these stories. I found that really fascinating. What really makes this an engaging book is the variety of form. That's what I really loved most about it, is you start a new story and you don't immediately know what form it will take. Will it be a diary? Will it be an interview? Will it be a newspaper clipping? Will it be a script? There's loads going on here, and I love stories that are told with different forms. I love reading classics that are made up so much of letters and diary entries, like Dracula. The reason I love Dracula isn't really all the vampirism, it's the fact that it's written as diaries and letters. I love that, and that's what all these stories are, and I find that form really engaging. So all of the trans history aside, all of the politics and the topicalness of it aside, the form and format alone is enough to bring you in if you appreciate the range of formats and the range of presentation in modern literature, in any literature. And I really do. As a collection of pieces of writing, this is fantastic for that reason. And then, of course, the fact that it is just very, very topical. It is about trans rights and it is about progress, and it does kind of make you feel good. Even though every story is about struggle, you see how those struggles have manifested differently as time has gone on. So, double-edged sword in that regard. Struggle remains, sadly, but struggle has changed. Legally, socially, even economically. It's different, but it's still struggle. I'm really grateful to Juliet Jacques for creating this. I think it's fantastic. I think my only issue with it is that sometimes it feels too much like non-fiction, and in that regard, it lacks a little bit of emotional oomph. Even though, as I said, these stories are quite sad and they're full of struggle, because of the format of them and because they are based on real things, there is, I guess, a lack of emotional power behind some of the stories. They're a little bit too matter of fact. There feels like there's a bit of a distance. You know, I felt like I was reading the book from quite far away, if that makes sense. I didn't feel too attached to these people because they're not characters, they are people. But I've read a lot of non-fiction, a lot of memoirs where I did feel very, very attached to them, and there's something about this collection that has a certain emotional distance, and I can't really put my finger on it, but it wasn't dependent on the story or the context or the form. It was all the way through. It must be something about Juliet Jacques' writing style. Not sure what it is. But aside from that, in terms of format, I cannot fault it. And in terms of content, I think it is an invaluable demonstration of trans history in the UK and the fact that we have always been here. It's pretty wonderful. And I'm very grateful to have it. And it's not just important. That can make it sound quite dry. It is also enthralling, mostly down to its variety of form and presentation. I love that. Variations is a fantastic collection of stories. Juliet Jacques is awesome. It's published by Influx Press, who always do amazing things. Please check this out. and subscribe for books.